elected officials and Mayor Solomon about how they plan to lead the city through this budget crisis. A lot of us have now heard the news that Jersey City is facing a very big budget crisis, a budget deficit, and we want to make sure that we are involving all residents in every ward into the discussion to make sure that you guys are aware of the issue and a part of the discussion on how we plan to solve it. Everybody here should have received a white index card, a pen, and a copy of the presentation materials just to make sure everybody is able to take the presentation with them, and if you for some reason can't see it clearly, that you have it right in front of you. If anybody does not have those materials, if you want to raise your hand right now, and we'll make sure that one of the members of our team gets them to you. But I think they are so fantastic that everybody received them at the door. So no need for that. And then we are going to hear from our BA, Peter Horton. He's going to give us a presentation outlining the basics of the budget deficit that we're in and make sure that everybody is brought up to speed. And then we will have a Q&A session. Pam from our office is going to be going around with a mic to anybody who has a question. You guys have that index card so you can jot down your thoughts as you're hearing the presentation. And then we will make sure that we take as many questions as we can before the event wraps. To ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak, please keep your questions to under a minute. And then we are going to have Mayor Solomon, Peter Horton, and some other members from our team answering those questions for you. If you have any additional questions after the meeting, you can go to jcnj.org/community meetings. There you can find information on upcoming meetings that we're having. You can read the full financial report if you haven't yet, and also submit additional feedback in addition to the feedback that you guys are going to provide us tonight. So thank you guys all so much for being here. I am going to pass now to Mayor Solomon to chat with you guys a little bit about how he plans to lead us through the budget crisis.
Thank you all. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening to be here. I appreciate your care and commitment to Jersey City, that you have thoughtful questions, ideas, ways to help us get through this. And that is going to be immensely important. And for us, it was really important to do these events. We've done a couple of smaller, kind of more roundtables. Now this is our third open public town hall. And what I have found is in each of them, I am hearing new and interesting ideas and ways for us to address this. And also just core priorities, right? It's really important for me to be hearing, as well as our other elected officials, what is on your mind, right? Yes, tell us if you have an idea to save money or to raise revenue, but also say, this is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about property taxes. I'm concerned about cuts to the rec department because it's not particularly well funded to begin with. Those are really important for us to hear as we get through this. Peter is going to walk you through more of the numbers. Obviously, I think most folks have probably heard, but we believe going into 2026, we're facing around a $254 million deficit. That's about 28% of our operating budget, one of the largest in the country. The deficit is one of the largest in the country. Just to give a sense of the scale and the scope, we were to lay off every single civilian that works for Jersey City. So everyone in public works, law department, health and human services, recreation, that wouldn't get us to more than half of our budget deficit. So it gives you a sense of the scope. The deficit is bigger than our police and fire salaries combined. So it's huge. And again, as Peter goes through it in more depth, but it was really created through the prior mayor choosing one-time sources and gimmicks to cover up the difficult budget situation that the city was entering and avoiding hard choices. And we're committed not to do that, right? We're committed to make sure that whatever we do is transparent, it's open to the public, and we ultimately get ourselves on sound fiscal footing as soon as possible. People oftentimes ask me, hey, you were on the council. What did you know about this going in? And what I always say is we knew the budget was in bad shape. It was something I campaigned on. We read a whole 8-page white paper about it back in June of 2025, something that Bill and I, as well as the other candidates running for mayor, talked about. But we anticipated getting in, we would find a budget deficit in the order of 100 to 150 million. And that would have still been a huge deficit, just to be clear, right? That would have been, significantly more than 10% of our operating budget, about 15% of our operating budget, depending on where it fell. That would have, again, been one of the biggest in the country. Those were things we knew about, right? So we knew that the mayor had raided the rainy day fund and that was down to zero, and we were going to have to fill that gap the next cycle. We knew that he had sold land and, again, had used the money from the land sales to plug the budget deficit, so we knew we were going to have a solution to that. Those were known things. The biggest thing that we weren't aware of was the size and scope of our healthcare costs. We found after we won the election and had my transition team start to look through the budget that there were $52 million in unpaid, unbudgeted for health bills in 2024 and 2025. It's an extraordinary amount, and that really was shielded and hidden from anybody, including the city council. And then we had to add another $50 million to accurately assess and budget for our healthcare costs going forward. Now, as Peter will tell you, we already started to work on this, and I apologize, I'm going to sneeze in 1 second. Excuse me. We're very polite in Jersey City. I appreciate that. So there we go, and diverse. So, but so we added that extra amount of money. Peter will talk about what we've already started to do, but including finding a way to save what we believe is $30 million in health insurance this year by switching our third-party administrator as well as other things. Now, the presentation won't cover this as much, but our biggest thing that we're trying to fight for is additional state aid. I'm going to sneeze again in a second, so apologize. Maybe walk around, it'll be a little better. But the state is going to be incredibly important. As I mentioned, the size and scope of the deficit, we can't get through this without state aid. So my job at 1, 2, and 3 as I've come into the administration is to work with our governor, our state legislature, our assembly and senate to make sure that they're going to support us through this. Now, even with their support, it's still going to mean tough choices. It's still going to mean tougher decisions on property taxes and service cuts and budget changes. We know that, but our hope is we can get back to real fiscal stability soon. But when I meet with Trenton, I give them 3 core messages: governor's team, Senate, Assembly. The first message I say is, we have our councilman at large, Rolando Lavaro, just came in. So thank you, Rolando, for being here. Appreciate it. The first message here is that Jersey City has been an economic engine for the state. And in many ways, the state has benefited significantly more from our economic growth than we have here in Jersey City. When a new building comes up, that new building has lots of economic activity that the state taxes. And then lots of high-income earners come in and they get a ton of income tax revenue. We, on the other hand, while we get some more property taxes, the state then cuts our school funding because the school funding formula is based on these new people coming in. And then the county makes us pay more taxes based on the county formula. So we're saying to the state, look, you need Jersey City's growth to continue because it actually helps your budget challenges and your budget issues, and you have benefited more than we have. So we're all in this together. If Jersey City doesn't do well, it's actually going to harm the whole state. That's the first message we give them. The second message we give folks is that folks in Jersey City are already stretched thin. Property taxes have gone up by some measures 50% in the last 5 years. People have been paying more and more and more in Jersey City and haven't been seeing improvement in quality and services, haven't been seeing improvements across the city. So we're really making clear that there's maybe this perception in Trenton that folks are doing well in Jersey City, and while certainly it's a great city, it's vibrant, financially people are being stretched to the breaking point in the city. And that gets to our third big thing we said at Trenton. Sometimes they have this impression that Jersey City is just the waterfront towers. We make it very clear, no, Jersey City is actually still a diverse middle and working class city. Yes, a lot of wealth has moved into Jersey City that gives us a little bit more capacity to pay, say, a bigger property tax bill. But one of the homeowners in Jersey City bought their homes 20, 15 years ago. They live on working class and middle class salaries. And if you don't take that into account when you think about Jersey City, you're making a fundamental mistake. We even talk about the poverty rate. In Jersey City, the poverty rate is 17.9%. That is closer to Newark and Patterson than it is to the median poverty rate in the state, which is less than 9%. So we are making clear to Trenton that we need their aid, but that it's beneficial for all of us. So I can talk more about it after the presentation about how we're pushing Trenton to help us, what we're asking for, and ultimately how we think that gets us back on our feet. But before Peter gives you more of the details, let me just invite up our 3 elected officials who are here. So first, let me start with your councilman here in Ward C, Tom Zupa.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So 2 months in as of yesterday, and we were met with 2 massive blizzards and a budget deficit. Obviously not how you want to start the term, but I want to give huge kudos to Mayor Solomon and his administration. I really can't state enough how transparent he's been with this council. And if you've been paying attention, this council asks a lot of questions. So, and we really dive into the details, as you would know if you watch the meetings. But Mayor Solomon's been fantastic, and not just telling us about the issue, but being upfront with it, making sure our input's heard. How do we respond to this issue? And it's a serious issue. So for Ward C in particular, as the mayor mentioned, Jersey City is still in a period of economic growth. Obviously, you're seeing a lot of development in Journal Square proper, and we anticipate seeing more of that. But so our priorities here will be making sure there are affordable units for residents to move into, while the state gets their tax benefits and we get our property taxes to the city. And the struggle is, how do you deal with a Ward C that was already kind of missing the needed services of cleaner and safer streets that we were getting? So for me, it's working with the mayor's administration to ensure that there's a change in culture in every department. Every quality that my wife finds annoying about me, I've been using to bring on to our directors and to our staff in a good way, making sure that the services are provided and that I follow up in my office. Arjuman's in the back, Lukeman's in the back, and our staff follows up with each director as constituent concerns come in. So obviously, again, a difficult conversation, but you can count on me to continue to fight for our priorities in Ward C, which is to have green space at Courthouse Park, to build affordable and to make sure our streets get cleaned and fixed. You'll see the pothole unit going out going forward. The mayor announced that today. Traffic enforcement, everything that our city does so well, or even not so well, it's going to be focused here in Ward C, and we're going to make sure we get the improvement that was promised. So again, I look forward to working with Mayor Solomon. He's doing a great job keeping the council in the loop, and we're happy to be a good partner with him. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilman. All right. Thank you, Councilman Zupa. And now our Councilman at Large, Rolando Lavaro.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. It's I wish I was here under better circumstances. We've got this huge, massive budget crisis that we have here in Jersey City. And the one thing I just want to assure folks is myself, as a longtime resident here in Jersey City, I know that you wanted change when you brought this administration and this city council into office. And so we're not doing business as usual. You're going to have this kind of transparency to ensure that you're aware of what's going on. But transparency and communication is not enough. You want to see the results ultimately. We want to make sure it's a budget that serves the people of Jersey City ultimately. And so regardless of how we ultimately deal with this, we're going to make sure that the final budget is dealing with the people, is serving the people of Jersey City, and it's a budget for the people of Jersey City. Lastly, I just want to say one other thing, which is this evening, before this, there was a ribbon cutting. Many of you may have heard of that. It was the Journal building, not too far from here, right? That's the massive tower over there. None of these officials were there at that ribbon cutting, and there's a reason for that. This is an administration and a council that's serving the people of Jersey City and not the developers. We made that promise throughout the campaign, and we're going to keep that promise to you moving forward. And we're going to make sure that our administration and our city council is ensuring that we have people who are representing the people of Jersey City and not the developer interests. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman Lavaro. And now Commissioner Bill O'Day.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. It's critical, and I have to give kudos also to the mayor. Honesty and transparency are so critical when difficult decisions have to be made. We all knew there was a budget problem, but nobody knew it was this bad. Some of the actions taken by the former administration, quite frankly, borderline on criminal. Bonding for operating expenses with capital bonds, some would argue that borderlines on being criminal. But now we've got a mayor and a city council that are here to tackle it. It's not going to be easy. Not everyone's always going to be happy, but we have to work together. It's going to be easy to throw stones or criticize and be critical. We could all do that. We could look good just doing that, but that's not going to help solve the problem. So I'm here to work with the mayor. I'm here to stand by the mayor. And as these tough decisions are made, to see how us in the county are able to be helpful and supportive of the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Day. And then we had one of our council members just arrive, so I want to invite her up to speak, Councilwoman at Large, Mamta Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mamta Singh. Pardon me, I was out raining, walking, so all that is happening right now. But just wanted to make sure that you know I'm here. I was involved in half part of Ward C with Tom. We have been Councilman Zupa, I'm sorry. But just want to make sure that you know you can reach out to us with any question, anything where you want to involve us. We have planned next week, me and Councilman Zupa and Chris Bernardo will be walking Journal Square area, just talking to the businesses, connecting with them, finding out the issues, and problems, because when we go out on street, talk to people, that's when we will see the real issues, real problems, and we will make sure that we'll work with you. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us, sorry. Thank you again. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And now to walk us through the numbers before we do the open Q&A, Business Administrator Peter Horton.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. See if this works too, because I haven't used it yet. Perfect. All right, so my name is Peter Horton. I'm the acting business administrator for the city of Jersey City. This is going to be a high-level presentation that really goes over those numbers that you keep on hearing in the news, right? What does that $250 million budget gap mean? How did we get here? And what does that mean for the individuals in this room and the taxpayers across Jersey City? So to start out, I just want to go over generally, and I know a lot of people in this room own property, so just going to kind of show you how the property taxes are broken down and why this wasn't just an overnight problem that the mayor inherited, but a problem that really snuck up on all the residents systematically through a series of decisions. So your taxes are broken down into 3 parts. You have the city's portion, the Board of Ed, and the county. And you'll see that 2018, when you go back for a while, everything was relatively in sync with one another, you know, about 33 to 28% approximately, and that continued to grow proportionally. However, what didn't grow proportional was the Board of Ed taxes. And a lot of that came from the state law change when they redid the funding formula for the schools. And you'll see that between 2018 to now 2025, you had a 200% increase in the amount of the Board of Ed's portion of the taxes. And you also see that in 2020 to 2021, where the city had a higher percentage of the taxes, about 44% of the overall tax burden, that shrunk. That shrunk in part because of one-time gimmicks like the COVID revenue that the city used to spend on operating expenses instead of long-term planning. And that ratio was thrown out of proportion compared to the Board of Ed taxes and the county taxes, and it continued to be out of proportion even to present times, where statistically speaking, it's relatively smaller compared to what the Board of Ed would be and the county would be, and has retained pretty much the level for the past 10 years where other parts of it have grown, right? So that's important to remember as we go into the human capital cost of this and what it means for the budget for the individual taxpayer. So for the projected budget gap in 2026, we have 2 tables to look from. One is the top part, which is going to be how the budget is currently broken down into expenses. And the bottom table will be the revenue proportion of where we're making up that revenue and trying to pay these taxes. What's important to remember that in most of these items on the top table, they are statutorily obligated expenses. Things like salaries, things like debts, things like health insurance, deferred charges, all those items, pensions, they can't be made up otherwise. We are obligated as a city to pay for them no matter what we do with the budget, right? And in the bottom portion where your revenue is at, you have your property taxes, which is the largest portion of the revenue portion, and we have the budget gap on the right-hand side. If you look at the number for the budget gap, $254 million, even if you compared that to the salary, say, of public safety, like the mayor said earlier, it would not make up even if we cut every single position in public safety. So this gap alone cannot be just made up with cuts to the city budget, to cuts to staffing, to things of that nature. We have to look at revenue sources as well as long-term planning to bring the budget back to where it should be and make sure both the expenses and the revenue even out each other. So how did we get here? The largest problem that the city's had historically to get in this position was use of one-time funds or unsustainable, expenditures essentially in borrowing. So you'll see from the top part, which is the fully budgeted expenses, and the bottom part, which is underlying revenue, there's always been a gap between the two. That gap, instead of being made up with more sustainable things, such as cuts in services or cuts in staffing or increase in other revenue sustainable sources, what they've done is they've looked for one-shot deals to make up that difference. And you'll see, for instance, when it was one of the largest gaps, 2021, where the budget expenses need to be made up substantially with COVID expenses. And that's why you have such a large gap right there. And in total, since 2019 to present, there's a combined expenditure of $677 million and unsustainable one-shot revenue. And what does that mean, one-shot revenue? That could be things like land sales, as the mayor indicated. That can be things like deferred charges. Instead of paying your pension expenses, instead of paying your police and fireman retirement expenses, you're borrowing against that to defer to future years so you don't have to pay what's currently owed in the current budget. So to give you kind of perspective of where we are budgetarily and how this differentiates us from different cities, we're going to go over the non-recurring revenue and how much the cities relied on it versus how many other municipalities have relied upon it. Our city relies, substantially larger, 22.5%, of unsustainable revenue or one-shot deals, right? When you look at Newark, when you look at Hoboken, Bayonne, cities that are either similarly situated to us or similarly situated geographically, we are substantially higher, almost double, if not triple and quadruple, many of the similar cities around us, right? So we're relying very heavily on the land deals, along the deferred charges, along all those kinds of expenses in order to get our budget closed, which is creating that large gap that we currently have to make up. Some of these things include, additional things beyond the one-shot deals, which is things that the previous administration has kind of committed to, which are things like pilots, surplus, property taxes, things like that that have expiring or will become a burden to the city going forward because we're going to lose their ability to capitalize on that. Now, this screen has a lot going on to it, but it's a very good snap of where we are and where we got to that $250 million number. It's better not to focus line by line, but kind of think it in as buckets and kind of tranches of where the number is getting to. So I'm going to go over to it so it'll be easier. So the biggest things to compare right now is we're looking at 2025 to 2026, right? On the top line, you have expenses, right? And what you're looking at is expenses that were not realized last year, but are being realized this year. Now, that's a combination of expenses that were deferred or expenses that should have been paid for, but the administration decided to offset them with one-shot deals or other ways, and now, because of the new administration, we're trying to make sure that we have a sustainable budget and not having to pay for those in the future or find gimmicks to get around them. So you'll see things like health insurance, right? There's a large change because a lot of it was not fully realized in the past budget. You'll see things like revenues for various contracts of that nature were never paid out. Like we had union negotiations that have to be settled, right? Usually most municipalities, and what the best practices to do, is to create a reserve to pay out those contracts. If you don't put the money in those reserves, you have a situation where the future administration ends up having to pay for those differences. You're going to have things like deferred charges for tax appeals and judgments. Those are, of course, when a developer or someone files an appeal on their taxes, thinks that they're being charged too much by the city, they can go to court. If there's a settlement and they're awarded it, the city has to cover that difference that we may have charged them initially, right? Again, cities and most municipalities, as a best budgeting practice, will set up money in reserves to cover that. If you don't do that, then you're in a situation like you are in this year where you have to cover that with additional revenue, right? So on the top portion is everything that we should have been paying but didn't pay. And what that equals is the change between 25 and 2026 is a total of $186 million, right? On the bottom portion, we have revenues that we've looked at, right? Some revenues you had historically from 2025, you will not realize in 2026. Revenues like some of the change in pilot revenues. You have change in property sales, one-time property sales. You have cash reserves. All of those have been depleted and no longer realized in 2026. For that, we have a difference of $89 million, right? When you can calculate the difference plus the difference in the actual expenditures, you get a whole total of $275 million that the city would have had to make up, right? Now that's slightly offset by some additional revenue. One thing that's been constant in Jersey City, and you're going to hear a lot about, is why don't the developers paying their fair share? That's you see certain parts like the $20 million. Now, $20 million may not be sufficient to cover everything, which is why you still have the $275 million being offset by the 20, right? Without more, it can't be offset more. Ratables, which we just covered. You're also going to have things change in other revenue sources, like you might have court, fines, things of that. Things that we predict in the 2025 budget have increased for the 2026 budget. All those together give you the full number of the $20 million. So you take the 275, which is a combination of the 186, the difference of the 89, and then you subtract the $20 million, which is the increased revenue that we did not expect from last year, and you're going to end up with the $254 million totals. So that's where we got that number from. And again, it's important to understand that that number is a combination of two things. A increase in expenditures from things that were not realized last year, and a decrease in revenue that were one-shot deals from the previous year. And what does that mean for our deficit compared to other municipalities? Like the mayor said, it is a historic number that most municipalities around the state and the country have not seen, right? We're at a 28% gap. The only one that's come close to us is Atlantic City. Even New York, that has a $1.5 million gap, when you realize that compared to their entire budget, it is percentage less than what we currently are at. You have cities like Detroit, Buffalo. And what's different about Jersey City, important to understand, is that a lot of times you see those significant gaps, they come from situations that are economic collapses. You have markets that have collapsed in those cities. You have revenue sources. You have sustainable issues that have all collapsed. That's what's gotten to those numbers. However, in Jersey City, we're an exception because we're actually doing financially very well as a city. Not as a budgetary concern, but growth, the building, all that kind of stuff is historically on the upswing, whereas our gap in our budget is increasing with it. Moving forward in our guiding principles. So this is kind of what we're doing in response to these issues and how we want to interact with the community, how we want to interact with everyone going forward, and how we want to have a presentation to the community as we go through this budget crisis, right? The first is recognizing we're in a crisis, right? We're in a situation where we're in $254 million in a hole, and we have a very short time to kind of make that up, and we have to work with our regional partners to get there. And the first is to lead by example. The mayor is doing this with doing these community meetings, interacting with the public, making sure, one, everyone understands it, understands how we got here, and understands how we can get out of here while taking the collaboration and the guidance from the community as well, right? Third point is transparency and clear communication. Part of what we're doing here today. We want to be as transparent as possible with the community to make sure that you guys are understanding the numbers, you understand how we're changing things, and how this might impact you individually as residents and as taxpayers. Fourth, minimize impacts on the working people. One of the guiding principles is, you can see, is that no matter what we do when it comes to salaries and wages and the expenses for the city, that alone and cuts there could not accomplish the gap that we have in the budget. So the important thing to understand is, what we want to make sure is that this quality of these residents and the tax that you're paying, you're getting the most money for it, right? So we want to ensure that we are working with everyone not to reduce services, but to find a way out of this that will minimize an impact, ensure that the city is getting the best quality of life and the best quality services as possible, right? We want to remove inefficiencies and corruption without cutting important government operations. And lastly, we want to put the city back on a solid financial footing without resorting to irresponsible tricks, right? Those things are like we talked about. One-time budget revenue, expenditures, property sales, the MUA, when they made a deal with the MUA for the income from them, things of that nature that are not sustainable. And what are the priorities for community leader meetings? So as the mayor mentioned, this is not our first meeting. We've had multiple meetings throughout the city. We're going to continue having these community meetings. We also had meetings with leaders in each of the individual communities, some of which I saw you at. Those meetings really kind of understand the priorities of different communities through the individual wards and through the individual parts of the city, to understand what are priorities that we should focus on as we look at remedying the budget gap and determining how to solve this crisis. And the first one that's come throughout the entire city is affordability. Affordability and keeping property taxes stable has been a staple in every community group and every meeting we've had so far. We want to ensure that developers are paying their fair share from the crisis, right? Which means, in part, a full review of existing pilots. That's something the mayor committed on very early in his administration. He had an executive order, and he's committed to making sure we review all the pilots and that every developer is paying their fair share, and that we are holding everyone accountable for the situation that we're currently in. We also want to protect essential services with quality of life and invest in things like traffic safety, sanitation, crossing guards, youth programs, and other open spaces, parks, and things for recreation, right? All those items have come through this community meetings. All are important to the administration, and all their guiding principles as we look at remedies of the budget situation and how we will determine how we solve this budget crisis. Now, what have we done so far? The administration has taken a lot of actions to be proactive and make sure we're addressing this as quickly as possible, right? First and foremost, as I mentioned, the mayor's executive order on pilots. This was done immediately when the mayor took office. It's been done historically, and when it was done historically, we found around $7 million of revenue that the city should have received. So the expectation is, if we do a more thorough and expansive review of this, there might be other revenues there that we can try to capitalize on. As the mayor mentioned, we've also changed our healthcare administrator. There was an immediate cost that the last administration could have taken, but did not take under Mayor Solomon, By taking it's estimated to save about $30 million in the current situation. We're also having town hall meetings, as we are right now, with all the wards to make sure that everyone understands the situation, understands how we got here, and how we can best work together to get out of it. The administration has hired financial advisors to assist in developing our budget. They're helping us run through the numbers. They're helping us conduct audits and think of ways that we can potentially realize certain revenue sources we might not have and cut costs where we can. And lastly, we are aggressively pursuing all revenues to close the budget gap. That means working closely with state and county officials. The mayor has been meeting consistently with our county representatives. As you can see, we had one here tonight. He's worked with state representatives, and they're trying as best as they can to push Trenton and other entities throughout the nation to try to find sources of income and revenue that we may have not realized historically. The mayor's mentioned recently that there was a congressional allocation where the congressmen in the federal level can try to bring money back into the district. That has not historically been capitalized on by the other administrations. The mayor is very aggressive in pursuing that and trying to get as many dollars as possible, whether it be directly from Trenton through aid or through other alternative sources to bring in more money to the city. He's also evaluating opportunities for increased revenue. That's going to mean things we talked about earlier. Parking, tickets, quality of life issues. You guys in this room have all identified, I'm sure, individually and complained about situations around the city. It's a missed opportunity not only to get our city cleaner and better, but making sure that the people that are dirtying it up and creating that the hazard for everyone are contributing to our financial situation through fines and other modes of enforcement. We're also going to evaluate staffing and resize where necessary. As we get the priorities from you, as we talked about in the previous screen, we're going to look at, do we need as many people in certain departments? Do we want to focus on certain issues of quality of life that, other issues we might not need to focus on? Those are the type of things, getting the feedback from you that we can help us determine where we want to put our money in our budget going forward. We also want to look at revenue generating and cost reduction ideas. So this has come a lot through our community meetings and talking with local leaders. We want to determine, are there better ways to find revenue for the city, and are there ways to look for reductions in costs for the city? Some of that has been better enforcement. Consistently, almost everyone, and this might be a shock for the Jonah Square people, have talked about better enforcement of parking issues, right? Double parked cars, people that are parking and not paying their parking fees, all that kind of stuff is something we're definitely going to look at, because it's a revenue source that solves the problem but also helps the budget situation that we're currently in. We want to look at moving violations. We want to look at building and code violations. We want to look at the payroll tax, where people may have not been contributing the amount they should be contributing to. Because again, if we remember the very first slide, it's not just about what's costing the city. It's what's costing you at every level, through the Board of Ed, through the county, and through the city. So the more that we ensure that people who should be paying for their fair share are paying their fair share, the less is coming out of your pockets individually. We also want to look at more efficiency in delivering services, right? One of those, as you can tell, is what we already did, is transition to new healthcare, all right? We were paying more than we had to at an employment level, at a city level, and we're looking at making that switch, or we have looked at making that switch, in order to ensure we're getting the best deal for the residents and the employees of the city, right? And proper use of officers. Now, this is the fixed post that I know you've heard a lot about throughout the previous administration, and where they would have officers sit in specific spots to make sure that area was more secure. What you have when that happens, though, you do not have as much response, and you don't have much as police helping out in areas that need that, in the Jonah Square area, the Heights area, other areas. So this is really about ensuring that we're using the officers to the best of their ability to kind of reduce those costs and overtime that comes with them. Which brings us to our next point, cutting overtime. To the extent possible, we're going to cut overtime and look at ways of cutting overtime where it may have been in excess previously, right? But again, the guiding principle there is we do not want to lose these services that are being offered to the city, right? So if there's services that are related to ensuring the streets are clean or safe, we're going to make sure that we're trying to put as much as we can into keeping those as they are. We're also going to aggressively pursue grant revenue, right? Something that his city has historically done is they've had grant services provide assistance, but it hasn't always been capitalized as much as possible. As I indicated earlier, we have a governmental team at the federal level that was not initially engaged in the past administrations to bring in more of that revenue and that grants to the city to help offset some of the expenditures that you guys are paying for out of pocket. And lastly, we want responsible economic development. That means incentivizing housing, but also ensuring there's affordable housing with it, right? We want to make sure that there's growth in the city and that we continue to be an economic driver for the state, but it has to make sure it's not just burdening the residents who live here, but also helping the residents live here. So if we're developing, we want to make sure there's affordable housing with it, so everyone gets a chance to live here and continue to raise their families here. We also want to attract businesses, right? We are a driver of the region. We have a lot of residents and workers coming from New York and all around the area to work here. We want to make sure that we continue to attract businesses that are going to continue to have the growth that comes with the city. And lastly, we want to attract more tourism for revenue purposes, right? This is what has come out consistently in a lot of the meetings, where everyone knows that Jersey City is now the official golden door. It's always been the golden door, but now we've actually had the people come here and, you know, really show that they want to come here, spend their money. They want to come here, see shows, eat at restaurants, and really, you know, enjoy the city that many of you who've lived here a long time have known all your time, right? And it's being shown and kind of highlighted throughout the region and throughout the country. We have a lot more tourism and people coming here for those reasons, right? One of the things that people have told us about is they want to make sure that as we're doing that, incentivizing that, they're also making sure we're capturing revenue from it. So it's not just residents who live here, but everyone who's enjoying the city is making sure they're paying their fair share. So we want to thank you all for coming. The mayor's going to have a few more remarks, but again, this is a very collaborative process, right? We want everyone to be a part of this, part of the solution. If you have ideas, whether it be small or large, we want to make sure you get your input there. We have a QR code that you can scan and submit questions to us. If you're not, you know, comfortable submitting them right now with the public or want to submit them later, but we're open to all questions. We're open to all assistance that we can, you know, work on with you guys.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peter. Let's give Peter a round of applause for a wonderful presentation. Before we begin, I'm just going to reiterate some more of the rules for this Q&A. We're going to start in the back and work our way up, taking questions. Pam, who is holding the microphone right now, is going to come to you and hold the microphone while you ask your question. Nathaniel in the back, we're not getting virtual questions right now, or? Okay, got it. Well, you just let me know if we do have any, and we'll take those. And again, we want to have each resident limit themselves to one question, and try to keep it as concise as possible so we can hear from as many people. And as promised, we'll do about 20 minutes of Q&A, or if we run out of questions first, that's totally okay. And again, there will be plenty of opportunity afterwards for more feedback and more questions at jcnj.org/community meetings. So raise your hand if you have a question, and Pam is going to make her way to you.
Hi,
Tell me your name when you're.
my name is Joe. I'm wondering, like, I know you talked about responsible development. I know I walk downtown, I see parking lots. Those don't pay a lot of property taxes. What are you doing to kind of encourage faster development of underutilized plots of land into things that generate more property tax revenue for the city?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So, you know, one of the ways that we can, you know, help our way through this is by getting more property tax revenue for the city. You know, you see obviously in the slide earlier when it went through the budget things, you know, we're getting 13 million more in property tax revenue this year for the city. That's a good number. Obviously, it's, you know, it's a 5% of the total budget deficit. So I think for us, you know, it's one piece of the broader puzzle for us. So then you say, okay, what can you do? One thing we can do is, look, if somebody has a project that we call as of right. So as of right means they have all the approvals ready to go. We want to make sure that speeds through the system. So that's basically permitting reform. So we are working on permitting reform, making sure that if you have an as of right project, you go through your steps as quickly as possible. You know, we're working on broadly just reforming our inspections processes, so you get the CO quicker, and if you get the CO quicker, we can start charging the higher real estate taxes quicker. That's the first thing. The second thing would then be, are there projects where the owner is, you know, just sitting on it, right? So they might own a parking lot, and they might be, or a piece of vacant land, and they're just saying, look, you know, maybe I'm going to develop this in 15 years, and there could be a variety of reasons for that. But we don't want that, right? We don't want people, you know, land banking, holding just, you know, empty space, especially if they're not maintaining it. And you see that a lot across the city. So we are looking at ways that we can incentivize. You know, are there vacant lot fees we can increase, or can we work on our redevelopment powers to push them to develop further? That's the sort of second biggest thing that we're looking at. Our commitment on development, though, is anytime there's a big project, we are going to make sure the community is aware. So we are going to work to make sure that the community is engaged in those projects. If there's a new proposal, right, if it's obviously as of right, it's already there, it's one thing. If it's a new proposal, we want to make sure the community has real engagement in those processes. So that's roughly kind of give you an initial sense of how we're going to try to approach it.
Hi, I'm Mike Patel
Yes.
from the Ward C. I have a few questions about the budget balance.
Yeah.
the last year budget was, it said the $715 million. You are proposing 902. Also, like I see 2026, you are giving like some comp retirement payment, police fire, you increasing $11 million. Another you see like there's something $12 million, $8 million. Then defer changes, you increase the almost the 3 times, right? If you noticing the last year budget and this year budget, right? If you go for the last year budget, right, and keep the same budget, still you are not the 254 million, but at least like you can cutting down for the, I think 25 or $30 million still is the gap. So why don't you go for the last year budget?
Yeah.
Instead of the raising the property tax,
Right.
why you want to raise the property tax?
Yeah.
Because we already like 30 years amendment you guys giving to the previous one, and charge them the money. They have to pay. Why the small like mom and pop owner, like the single family, 2 family, 3 family people, they have to pay the more taxes?
Yeah. All right. That's a great question, Mike. Thank you. Can we flip back to that slide because that'll be easier for me to answer for Mike. Yeah, perfect. So, Mike, you're 100% right. So what you're looking at is you're saying, well, look, here's what we were paying in 2025. Here's what you're charging in 2026. These are big increases. Why are you doing that? It's a totally fair question. The reason we're doing that, and this is the point is we're required by law to make all these payments. And what was happening was the prior administration was either take this one, tax appeals and judgments. We have to pay that by law. We have no choice. That is a required payment. So what the prior administration did last year, the reason you see a 0 here, is they bonded for it. So they issued a bond, and then we have to pay interest on that bond. So what happened was so it doesn't show up in this column, which is your budget number, but you're paying for it, and in fact, you're actually paying more for it because you had to have to pay interest on the bond going forward. So what we should do is budget this in our budget. So this isn't it's not a choice where we're saying, well, we'd rather pay 0 and now we want to pay $8 million. We legally required. So all of these are basically legally required payments. So the comp retirement for police and fire, same thing as the tax appeals. That's a legally required payment. The prior administration used a bond to pay for it. Reserves for this means there's various unions. So basically these are legally required payments to our unions. And the prior administration just didn't budget for these payments. So we have to pay them to our unions. Health insurance, same thing. We're legally required to pay $195 million. Now what we did was we tried to find a solution to lower this payment, and we think we can pay $30 million less. Same thing here. This was being paid, legally required to pay. We paid for it out of capital expenses. Deferred charges, we have to pay $52 million in bills they didn't pay. So again, I wish we didn't have to pay them. I wish I could just cut this back to 24, and that just goes through the whole list. But the point, just one more second, and then so that explains most of those issues. But to the point you're asking is, we know that property taxes have gone up a ton. People are hurting. The last thing we want to do is raise the property taxes. So what are some of the things we can do before that? We are going to look to see where we can cut salary and wage line items. So we're going to maybe not fill some vacancies in the city. Look where we can shift staff. Maybe we can combine positions. Where can we find efficiencies? Where can we find saved resources? And then we're also looking at new revenue sources. So we're looking at things like, enforcement. So if these big landlords are not properly maintaining their properties or people are leaving litter, let's do what we should do, which is give them tickets, not just for revenue, to get better behavior, and then use the revenue in that regard. The challenge with that is, even when we start to do that, it's going to take some time, right? We're not going to really see that revenue for 6 months. Got to go through the court system. So it's hard for us to build that into this year's budget. And then we are going to make sure that we're not legally allowed to charge the big developers more in taxes. There's the state law against that. But we are going to audit their tax breaks. We are going to look to make sure they're paying, because I think everyone knows that they've kind of gotten off easy for a long time. So we do want to do everything legally that we can. So it's very fair questions, but hopefully that gives you a sense of why we're pushed into this position, because we're legally required to make all those payments. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
quickly.
On the same column,
Yeah.
like you are deferring like revenue income, right?
Yeah.
Like on the last series, revenue is $171 million, and you proposing $81 million. So the gap is almost $90 million. Why is that?
Sure. So this is again, I'll go through each of these because it's very useful to know. So these are revenues that the city was getting in prior years. So the first one here is pilot revenue. That's the revenue you get from the legal agreements with developers who have pilots. Because a lot of those pilots are expiring, which actually helps the schools in the county, but we get less money. So we're just projecting we're getting less here. Accounting. So the prior administration used an accounting trick to basically fictitiously generate $15 million in revenue. We don't want to use those tricks because those tricks are what got us into this mess. Sale of properties. Administration sold a piece of land south of the medical center for roughly 20. That's the biggest bulk of this, so just make it simple. They sold it for the $33 million. They used all of that money to go into the budget. So we could sell land again. We do have enough land we could sell. But the problem is it's one-time source of revenue. But this cost goes on year after year after year. The way I would describe it is, you have to pay your rent each month. Let's say you're having trouble paying your rent. And you say, well, to pay my rent, I'm going to sell my car. Well, you can only do that once. So yeah, maybe you sell your car and you can pay rent for the next 3 months. But then after 3 months, you still got to pay your rent. And that's what they were doing, was they were selling these one-time things. And then the last is cash reserves. So that's our rainy day fund. Our rainy day fund, again, you're supposed to preserve it and only spend it in time of emergency, but they spent it down to roughly zero, so we have no money left here. That's our cash reserves. It's like your bank account. They spent the bank account to zero, so now we have nothing left here. So that's why the revenue is much smaller here. And those are the types, again, a lot of these are these one-time gimmicks. We just don't want to do this anymore because at some point you have to pay the bill, right? A lot of this is putting it on the credit card, a good way to think about it. So we just can't keep doing that. And so, I always be honest with people, we're looking at everything. So first is where we can find waste and cut that. Where can we find sources of revenue? Where can we get state assistance? And all of that is. But yes, we also have to look at property tax increases. And I wanted to be honest when people ask me and say, yes, we anticipate a property tax increase this year. We're doing everything we can to limit it. Everything we can to make sure that it is not through the roof because we know how much taxes have increased on everybody in Jersey City. But we also have this $254 million deficit, and we have to close it, and we can't allow this to persist because if I do a one-time gimmick this year, I still have the problem next year.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Mike, stay after the meeting. We
Yes,
know
I'll
where
talk
you
more.
live. We
Yes,
could
sir.
talk more. Before I get to Laura, anyone else from this area? Okay,
Ryan in
one
the
more
back.
back here.
Hi, good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Thank you for holding this, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. Ryan Spain. Yeah, thank you. So in terms of state aid, I was wondering if your administration had any idea what amount do you think they would come in and help at?
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a great way. So I'll say a little bit more about the state aid process. So there are a couple different ways that state aid can come, but the biggest way is what's called through transitional aid. It's where cities apply to the state and say, hey, we're in financial distress. We're asking you to give us money. We submitted an application. We haven't gotten an exact number because we're still finalizing a couple of our financial documents for this prior year, 2025. But you're talking in the order of more than $150 million request from the state. Now, I can't tell you they're going to give it to us, right? I think the most they've ever given to another city is $70 million. But we're going to ask for what we need, and that amount of money. What we said to the state again, those three things I said earlier. But its first is, it helps you because you don't want Jersey City to, if everyone in this room, if we increase property taxes by a huge amount, people are going to start leaving, and developers are going to stop building, and it's going to be disastrous. That helps you. Jersey City is a city of middle and working class families. The governor ran on an affordability platform. You don't want to force the biggest, second biggest city in the state into an affordability crisis. That's the second thing. And third thing is, we need to make sure that we are partnering together. And if you give us this aid in this first year while we've got this big crisis, we can get better very quickly. We don't need this aid for 6 years. We don't need to stay, getting the state to give us massive sums on a yearly basis. We need an initial infusion to get us back on our feet, and then we're going to be able to get to a significantly more stable outcome in the near future. So that's what we're doing. Now, transitional aid does come with what's called a fiscal monitor. So it's somebody who the state basically assigns to review our contracts, review our employment decisions. And obviously that restricts my freedom to a degree, but for me, if I have state support in getting our fiscal house back in order, that's a good thing. So we're going to take that. Now we're going to ask for every other type of aid too. It's the primary source of aid, but we're going to aggressively seek grant money. Can we get more grant money in? Something that Peter had mentioned, that the prior administration wasn't asking our Congress people for money, which we just is sort of it's a missed opportunity, if you will. So we're going to try to aggressively get money from the state, work with our legislative partners to see what we can get from Trenton. as well. But that's the kind of the overview of what we're doing in the state process. Yes.
Oh, you got it there? Okay, hi, Laura Moss from Courthouse Park Advocacy Group. In relation to Courthouse Park, that money was bonded for a few years ago. Do you know where that money is?
Do you know off the top of your head how much? I'll let Peter.
Okay, and then I have a follow-up question on that.
So this seems self-serving because in full disclosure, I'm on the board of Courthouse Park, but
Yes.
we do know the money is. The money is in an account. It's still there. It has not been appropriated for anything.
Okay, so this administration, it's committed to this project even though it's several years long. That's great news. Thank you very much. And then before we end tonight, can you give us some good news?
Sorry?
Can you end on a high note and
sure,
give us
yeah.
some things to look forward to?
Do you want me to
Because
do it
this has
now, or
been
do you want me to do it at
kinda
the
grim.
end?
No, but just something to make
Some
us all
optimism?
go,
Yeah,
yes.
I'll do
Okay,
some
thank
optimism.
you.
That's good, yeah. It's spring, guys. The snow is gone. The kid, no. We have Pago. So let me give you the genuine optimism in my sense. So the first thing is, I genuinely think we have the team in place to get us through this. So for me, core thing was bringing great people into City Hall. Our new finance director, Bill Vaquer, is wonderful. Our two deputy mayors for housing and for education, Dia Bryant and Keshav Poda, are wonderful. We're kind of getting our department directors set up. We announced Andy and Anicia today. Our public safety director, Anthony Ambrose, has been finding savings from the moment he got in to public safety 2 months ago. So I think we are in a place where we're going to have the team to get us through this. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is ultimately our economy remains strong, and that's the foundation. So the fact that we have a strong economy means that as long as we get the state support we need, and yes, it will be painful, but as we get the state support we need, have a difficult year, we should be able to get out of this sooner rather than later and get back to a more stable footing. Third piece of optimism is there's no more gimmicks, right? Like, we're going to tell people, be fully transparent, know exactly where our budget stands, and get us into a significantly better budget position so that we will have real financial stability going forward for, as long as the leaders keep making the right responsible choices, we'll be in a significantly better thing. I should also add, we have a council that is both collaborative, but also has a trust but verify approach, which is the right approach for a council, right? They know that we're in a tough spot. They're partners in working together, but they're not just saying, do what you want, right? They're asking us tough questions. They're putting us on the spot as an administration. That's what they should do. We need a council that's more independent than we've had in the past. And it's a balance, right? Obviously, like in some ways, my life is easier if the council just rubber stamps everything, but that's not good governance. And none of the council members have that personality. They're all the type of personality of, we're here to represent our constituents and do right by them. And that means asking tough questions, even if I think the person who's answering them has good intentions. So I think that, for me, gives us a good sense of hope. Last but not least, I'd say is, the state has been receptive to our conversations. They haven't said, we're giving you what we're asking for. I think they said we have our own budget issues. But it's not like the door has been shut to us, right? They understand that Jersey City matters, and they're working with us. So ultimately, I hope we get what we're asking for. But if we were in a place, we could easily be in a place where we had a governor who just said, tough luck, right? You're on your own. And we don't have that, which is great.
Okay, great news, Mayor. All right, okay, I'm going to start here and then move this way. Sorry, Roslyn.
Yes.
I skipped Roslyn.
Hey, I'm Jeff Forthammer. My wife and I are renters, and my wife owns a small apartment my daughter resides in, so I feel I have a lot at stake here. To be honest, I'm a little underwhelmed by the suggestion so far that we're going to get out of this by next year, because we have a $200 million, as you put it, and I thought the report was very well done, structural deficit. So it means forever we've got to find another $200 million of revenue or $200 million less in expenses. So to that regard, have you started conversations with the city's employee unions regarding how they are paid? Because realistically, there's certain benefits they have that as a private sector employee I never had. I'm glad they do, but it's obviously contributing somewhat to the budget problem.
Right, appreciate that question. So you are right, obviously, in highlighting the structural nature of the challenges. And one of the things we didn't talk a ton about here, but we are actively seeking new revenue sources. We think we can get those through better enforcement. We think we can get them through parking enforcement. Just to give you an example, and obviously people don't like parking tickets, Hoboken gets $20 million annually from parking. We get about $4 million. So Hoboken is a third of the size, or fifth of the size of our city. So there's a lot of revenue sources, but for this year, it's hard. You can't really rely on any of those in your budget because any new policies wouldn't put in place are going to take a couple months to go into effect. And just for the nerds here, we're on a calendar year budget, so already 2.5 months into our budget year. So this year is much tougher than future years. And then the question on the unions, obviously the biggest source of any municipal cost is combination of salaries and healthcare. It's our people. And we value our people, and they do great work. We also know that we have to have sustainable contracts going forward. What turns out is most of our contracts are expired as a city. So most of our union contracts expired, most of them in 2024. So they've been out of contract for a year. Generally, when people are out of contract and you sign an agreement, you have to do what's called retro pay. You owe them back. That's this item right here. That's that 12 million right there. But we know that because we have the ability to negotiate, we don't have to renegotiate most of these contracts where we're negotiating them, that we're going to make sure whatever we're presenting and proposing is financially stable. So we're going to respect the work that the unions do, but we're also going to make sure that whatever proposal we put in front of them is stable for us going forward. And so, that is top of mind, knowing that things. So we don't have to renegotiate the contracts, we just have to negotiate them now. Sure. So basically, to any the legal mechanism and the communications. Legally, if we come to an agreement, obviously the union has to pass it on their side, but then our city council has to pass it. So it's a resolution that will come before the city council. It'll be on the agenda that's advertised, 4 or 5 days before the meeting. We will also make it public that, hey, we've come to an agreement with this union, and the council is going to be voting on it, and here are the core terms of the agreement. So we'll make that public as well.
Okay, thank you. And here we go, Rosalind. Say your name.
You just said Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Rosalind.
I work for the health department in the division of food and nutrition. And I would like to know, do you know which departments you are going to be cutting?
Sure. So it's a great question. So what our first goal here is to start with vacancies across the city. So start with saying, hey, look, we have a bunch of vacancies in the city. We can consolidate most of those positions, not hire a lot of them. And that was the first sort of cost savings. Then the second is going to be a process by which we go to each department director, which we've already started, and say, tell us where you can save money. So we're already getting those things back to us. We're talking about ways in which we can save. I mean, one example, we're moving out of the East District Police Headquarters have been operating trailers. Those trailers cost $60, $70K a year to rent. We're moving into an existing city building that we own, so we can save $60, $70K. Obviously, that's not the scope of our deficit, but every little bit helps. Then we're going to go basically say, where can we have efficiencies? So we're not talking about cuts, but where can we maybe merge things, get better city services? What I've said to the city employees, and my promise was that furloughs and layoffs, I can't take them off the table given how bad our city's budget deficit is, but they are a last resort. I respect the work that our city employees do. That's the last place I want to get to. Now, if we ultimately don't get the aid we're asking for from Trenton, I have to consider everything. But we're not sitting and starting by saying, well, this place is going and that place is going. We're starting with a process of don't fill the vacancies, work very closely with the department directors and division directors to give us areas of efficiency, try to get that state aid in, and then ultimately try to right size so that ultimately the amount of employees that we have makes sense given the amount of revenue that's coming in, which I think we can do without massive, large-scale changes to our city workforce if we get the support we need from Trenton.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Going to add that too is that when we talk about cuts too, I know it's terrifying for employees especially because they think of their own jobs and their own families and everything. There's also cuts to contracts. So a city's budget is not just the personnel, not just the salaries. It's contracts they have. It's third-party vendors that they use. So those are things we look at as well. So kind of belay some of those fears. We're not just looking at people. We're looking at the entire budget, the entire department, and where we can improve efficiencies in that department and maybe save costs in that department, whether it be through contracts or any other means necessary.
Okay, thank you. You want to stand?
Ray Schwartz, just a question. It just seems to me that in the end, you may have to borrow money to begin with, and just to fill up the gaps. But you mentioned about people warehousing property as a policy. I mean, maybe there's a way of people. It's hard to say whether landlords are warehousing or just can't find tenants. There's sort of a system that you can try to bring businesses into commercial properties.
Sure.
Sort of say some sort of system to do that. And tenants too, etc.
Absolutely. So just one thing on the borrowing point, if ultimately the city has to borrow to close the deficit, we have to present a balanced budget to the state. Ultimately, we would talk to the state about it and whether we can do so with zero interest loans and an extended payback period, because that would obviously allow us the time, again, to right the ship, right, to get revenues and appropriations in line with each other. And that's where the partnership with the state's so important, and above and beyond just aid, the possibility of, if ultimately that's where we end up, looking at loans, to be able to do that with the state in a fiscally responsible way, right? You don't want to do it on loans and pay high interest, because then you're not solving the problem. Then in terms of the warehousing, yeah, so for retail businesses, we are really trying to reform our economic development agency to be a place where you can go to get support from for small businesses, where property owners can go and say, I'm looking for X or Y type of retail business to come into my space. Can you help me make a connection or find somebody? Because I think this will do well in this neighborhood, and I'm trying to find somebody. And then on the warehousing or property, I'm also really talking about like basically vacant land, dilapidated buildings, or sort of land that's like a parking lot, right, that could be used for other more productive uses. So those are when that type of warehousing is being done. There's definitely developers that will just leave a building vacant, right? They'll be like, I think this neighborhood will pop in 10 years, so I'm just gonna let it vacant, which is, they're trying to, in some ways even make the neighborhood worse, so people leave and then move out, which unfortunately we see too often. So we want to find, look at it. Can we create vacancy? Fees, things like that, increase registration fees, anything that targets those vacant properties.
Okay, last question, Danielle.
I think we have two.
We have two? Oh,
Yeah, just last two. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Danielle D'Adamo, lifelong resident,
Yeah.
current property owner. Has the city considered exploring these revenue options, such as a stormwater utility fee, which aligns costs with environmental impact rather than property value, or developing a more coherent cannabis rent-of-use strategy, since there's lots of cannabis dispensaries, that could create reoccurring funds earmarked for public services? Many cities nationwide are using these tools to reduce reliance on property taxes. So I'm curious if Jersey City is evaluating similar possibilities.
Yeah. Thank you, Danielle. So first of all, I start with this. Every idea is a good idea at this stage. If you have any idea for revenue, any idea for cuts, where we think we can make things more efficient, we're open to it. So we are creating literally a list. There's an actual list. We are going through them one by one and determining the viability. Some are longer term, some are shorter term, but every single one is logged and considered. So then for the two that you've mentioned, so stormwater utility, yes, it is on our list. And just so folks know, what we're looking at would be for bigger properties, not for homeowners. But what a stormwater utility does is it says not in lieu of the property taxes you pay, it would be in addition. But what it does is it says, look, let's say you take the parking lot example from earlier. If you have a parking lot that's all permeable, all asphalt, that means when it rains a ton, as we see today, when it rains a ton, that water has nowhere to go, and it basically kind of floods the area. It overwhelms our sewers. And what we want is someone to have what's called a permeable pavement, where it can kind of be soaked up like a sponge, or you plant trees which soak up the water. It's not just good for the environment, it actually helps reduce flooding. It puts less pressure on our sewer system. It's overall a good thing. So there's an idea where can you charge an additional fee for people who aren't doing that or keeping it all paved. Now, we don't want to do that on your small landlords and your homeowners, because we know how hard the tax burden is. But can we look at big lots, right? Pick some big square footage. I don't know off the top of my head, but and be able to then implement this. That is 100% an option for us, and it's being considered. But again, even if we did that, we're talking in our best case scenario the revenue for next year. So, but still matters, and it still gets to this: how do you align revenue and appropriations? And then cannabis, we collect a 3% tax on cannabis. I don't have the exact number. You don't know, do you know, Peter? Yeah. It's in the, I think, 2 to 4 million range, so helpful but not massive. But we're actually looking at the state. The state has actually collected much more in cannabis revenue, and we're seeing if we can get more of that cannabis revenue back to us. So that is what we're looking at. Yes. And the last question asked.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's probably the least important question.
That's fine.
However,
Yeah.
I was just wondering, my name is Jean Nickerson.
Yes.
I'm a lifelong resident
Beautiful.
as well, and I
Yeah.
was just wondering, you had mentioned something about the health
Yes.
service, and you mentioned something about the contracts, that you would be looking at those. Would those contracts, though, might trickle down and impact the hiring or the downsizing of these organizations that still need their workers?
Sure, I can take a little bit. So on the health insurance, just to explain what we did. We have an administrator of our health benefits. We previously had used Horizon, but we thought we could, or we switched to Aetna, Aetna Meritain, because Aetna now has a much bigger network. So they actually did an analysis of all the healthcare claims submitted by employees. and found that with Aetna, about a little less than 90% were in network, but with Horizon, it was less than 70%. So we can actually save money but provide employees with the same level of health care just by moving to Aetna, and more of their doctors are in network. We're now paying less. That was the basis of that. When it comes to the contracts, those contracts are not, they're obviously not the city employee contracts. They're, with vendors, the contract, we have a contract to maintain some of our parks. And then we have, contracts for the VIA service. So if we look at all of those contracts, are there ways we can find savings? I think the answer is yes. And if we're shooting at maybe 10, 15% in savings across the board, I think we can look at each of those. Now, obviously, those contracts have value. We wouldn't have them if at least they didn't provide something to the city. So obviously, those are the tough choices we have to make of saying maybe we're not going to have this service right now, given the financial difficulty the city is in.
And some of that goes back to what the mayor said earlier about is consolidation, right? So like HHS is a good example, right? We outsource our veterinarian services to multiple vendors, right? There's an option to potentially bring it in-house where you could have one person who's a paid employee of the city, working for the city, that could do the services of those 2 to 3 contracts. So there's things like that where if you put the effort into it and you really look at line by line of what we're doing in the city operationally, there's ways to consolidate, save the taxpayers money, and provide a better overall quality service to the residents. So that's something the mayor's been committed to, where he's had multiple meetings with different departments where he's going line by line and looking at how can we maximize the service of the city, so that way you as residents are not getting anything less than what you're getting. In fact, should be getting better than what you're currently getting. But we're also saving money from the city.
And let me say a couple of things. We're also looking at shared services. So similar to what Peter's saying, are there ways in which we can share things with other municipalities? And then a little bit maybe to Laura's question in terms of optimism. One is we do think that there's a lot we can improve upon just by paying attention. Just by saying, hey, this is a city service that no one really spent a lot of time and focus on. We want to do it better. We want to fill our potholes more effectively. We want to pick up our trash more effectively. And as an administration, we're going to bring the people in place to put real attention on that. So I think you may see significantly better city service delivery. That's my plan. My intention is for you to see significantly better service delivery over the course of this year as we put real attention into those city services. Last but not least is we are, getting, not moving forward with projects that simply we can't afford. So, and sometimes we have difference between capital budgets and our operating budget, and there's JCRA as a separate agency with a separate budget, but ultimately it all comes back together. So, the Pompidou is an obvious example for us. There was no way for us to fund that responsibly, but the administration was about to spend another $40 million on the project. I mean, 40 more million. We stopped that. Those $40 million remain with the JCRA. That can then go to different sources and different things. So I think there are those examples of us just having to say, hey, we can't keep doing this. And Pompidou is a good example of that, but they're going to be more like that going forward. Alrighty. Yes, Laura, sorry, you have a quick, yeah. Sure. Okay, that's a great question. So, Laura, basically the report basically for us is one is we can summarize all the things we've heard both today and all these other meetings. So I think we'll probably have a plan to kind of do a version of that probably in about a month. So all the meetings are March, so it'll be some point in April. And then we have to introduce a budget. We introduce the budget, then the city council reviews it, can amend it, and then ultimately adopt it. Right now, we're on a little bit of a pause until we get more guidance from the state on what they're providing us. So we're not, starting next year, we're going to be introducing budgets much sooner because that's the right thing to do. This year, we have to wait for the state to give us more information and more guidance for us to be able to introduce that budget. In my ideal scenario, we can get that introduced at some point in April. It might be a little bit later as we're getting more information from the state about what's in their budget and what they can offer us. All right. So I'll hang around for a little bit if folks have other questions. We appreciate you guys taking your time and energy. As Councilman Zupa said, not the most exciting topic, but to Laura's point, we are going to work our butts off to try to solve the problem. You have, I think, a wonderful city council, wonderful city administration, and we're going to work really hard to get us in better financial shape. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.